Alrighty, let's start 10 minutes early. How's it going, folks? Hope you're not living in Canada, where you have to constantly dodge a hail of gunfire. You're staring down the barrel of a firearm every minute. Which is not happening at all, which is why I don't know why we need more bans. Always more bans, right? Yeah, so I'm gonna have to try to restrain my urge to just go on a rant and be very sarcastic. It'll happen, but I'm gonna try to restrain my personal bias as much as possible to try to have a halfway rational discussion about this, right? Okay, so just recently I was looking at something which is now gone at Cabela's. There was a firearm that I was considering buying, maybe, which is now banned. It's now on the list of firearms that have been slapped with another ban hammer. What kind of evil device of mass destruction is this, you might ask? It's got to be something horrible, right? Like, utterly devastating. And a major threat to public safety, right? Well, it's a little 22 version of an MP5. A puny little 22. Which obviously can still do harm and all that, but 22s usually are not that high on the list of things that are gonna get you, right? For the most part. But I guess it looks scary. Oh, okay. I'm already doing it. I said that I wasn't gonna be too sarcastic. I'm already doing it. So let me try to restrain myself a little bit more. Just a tiny bit. Okay. Yes. So, of course, there are a bunch of potential reasons, a bunch of uses for firearms. Perfectly legal, peaceful uses. I mean, I suppose it's arguable how peaceful hunting is, because something dies, right? But legal. And recreational use. Self-defense, in my book, would be a perfectly legitimate use, but the law sees it otherwise here. Okay. So, back in 2014, you know, my channel first started to take off, I was fairly satisfied with the gun laws in Canada overall. Like, yes, some things were a bit too harshly restricted, like magazine capacity limits, suppressors not being allowed, which I think is stupid. It's perfectly reasonable. It makes gun ranges quieter. It's safer for everyone's hearing, and it requires less hearing protection, etc., etc. Plenty of things. But overall, there's a lot of regulations that would make Americans cringe that I think are actually fine. Like the requirement to complete a safety course. Yeah, okay. Mandatory safety course before you can have a gun. Sure, I'm fine with that. No problem. Safe storage. Sure, there's a bunch of things. But then they kept prohibiting more and more things. Like the list grew longer and longer and longer and longer. So I'll get to what they just did recently. Thank you, too many accounts. What about movie armory companies exempt? Yes, businesses can get a prohibited license, at which point they can own just about anything. That's the thing, yes. Okay, so the list. The list is mind-boggling. Here, let me just give you an idea. Okay. Newly prohibited makes and models. It's a long ass list, okay? This is not just, oh yeah, a couple of things that we don't like anymore. No, 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 this is a long list. And it has some stupid choices. For example, the GSG STG-44. If you haven't seen a picture of that, let me show you. There. Oh, right, that's the original. There. This little thing. You know? Little World War II reproduction in 22. It's just for collectors and for people who like some fun target shooting, etc. The thing is quite large for a 22. It's not practical. It's outdated. You know, it's silly to just be like, no, we can't have this anymore. Number of how do I put this without YouTube you know, being on my back? Number of firearm related undesirable incidents, okay, involving this firearm, as far as I know, 0. Okay. I don't get that one. I really don't. There's a number of others that I don't get. I already pointed out the GSG-16, which is a similar kind of deal. Different model, but yeah. So there's, in my opinion, absolutely no reason for this one in particular. Okay, let's see what else we got here. I have to admit, a lot of these I don't know. Barrett 98. Okay. One of those where I'm like, who shoots those anyway? The ammo is insanely, absurdly expensive. So, whatever. RX-4 Storm. It's just a pistol carbine. That's it. Let me see here. What should be 9mm, right? Ammunition. Oh, okay. Never mind. This one is 223 or 5.56. All right. Fair enough. I'm probably confusing it with the CX-4 Storm, which I believe they had already prohibited a while ago. Yeah, that's a CX-4 Storm. That's the 9mm one. That one was already prohibited. Why? I don't know. Keep in mind, by the way, all of this stuff, you know, scary semi-automatics. If you're not aware of Canadian restrictions, guess what the magazine capacity limit is for semi-automatic rifles and shotguns in Canada. Basically anything that's not 22, like center fire, semi-automatic rifles and shotguns. What do you guess? If you don't know, I mean, those who know, okay. 10, 15? 1. No. No, most of you got it right. 5. 5. Okay. Which is why it baffles me to no end that one of the ones on the prohibited list here is the PS90. That's the, if you don't know, the civilian semi-automatic version of the FNP90. You've probably seen it in video games, if you're not a gun guy or gal. Okay. So, hang on here. So this is what it looks like, right? Hey, there. Okay. Look at the magazine in particular. You know what the magazine capacity is? 50. This thing was neutered to hell and back. This was restricted to 5 out of 50. Completely neutered. Yet they still felt the need to prohibit the thing altogether. Does that make sense to any of you people? Yeah, a tenth of the capacity. What is the reason? Well, okay, I'll get to that in a moment because I want to be relatively fair. I can tell I'm already kind of failing because my bias and sarcasm is just fighting hard to take over. Okay, so I mean, I've already given you some examples here. I'm not going to go through the whole list, but it's a long list. And there are things, where was it? I mean, a bunch of the Chinese made Norinkos, but regardless, Caltech SU-16, I used to own that thing. I sold it like, I don't even remember. Well, actually, it must have been 2015. I think 15 or 16, something like that. So, yeah, I don't own this hideous device of mass destruction anymore. But I can tell you that it's nothing special. It's nothing crazy. You can use it for recreational shooting, no problem. It's not the most threatening thing in the world, especially with a 5-round magazine, right? Even if it was 10, there are pistol magazines that can be up to 10, right? That's the thing, like rifles, shotguns, semi-automatic, up to 5, and pistols, semi-automatic pistols, up to 10 rounds. So carbines, or carbine if you prefer that pronunciation, can have up to 10. All right, so let's look at some of the reasons. Apparently, firearm-related violence is up in Canada, and that seems to be the justification here. Okay. So, I don't want to do the usual thing of cherry-picking statistics and filtering through my bias to try to make the kind of argument that I want to happen, right? The kind of argument that I want to be true, basically. So I can see that if we look at this. This is from Statistics Canada. If you're one of those people who don't believe anything that government tells you, then, well, I don't know. I don't know what to tell you at that point. So, let me see here. There's an 8.9% increase in firearm-related violent crime from 2021. Of course, you have to look at the long picture, but either way, it has apparently increased since, what was that, 2009, I believe it was. So the question is, exactly what does that mean? Like, what exactly has increased, and what are some of the implications here? And there are a few things of note, in my opinion, with my bias. Yes, exactly, 2009 to 2022. Now, it's you can see that it dips first and then it goes back up. Now, the current numbers are higher than they were in 2009, but what I would like to see would be a more comprehensive overview where you show, like, from, I don't know, from 2000 or whatever, and then see exactly what happened. Because sometimes you have fluctuations that are independent of gun laws. And by the way, this is the trend with stricter gun laws. This is under Trudeau. This is with more prohibitions and more restrictions. So how much are they doing exactly? That's a rhetorical question, because you don't know what the numbers would look like if those hadn't happened. So in all fairness, it's correlation, causation, blah, you know the drill, right? So that doesn't tell you anything conclusively one way or another. But still interesting, right? Stricter gun laws but still more violent crime. And more violent crime in general, not just with firearms. So they found that 1.7% of... wait, am I still showing the screen? Yeah. 1.7% of injuries were caused by a firearm in 2022. That's a very low number, obviously. Very low. I don't know what the number is like for other places or the US or whatnot, but if you ask me, it's pretty low. Which is not to undercut the importance. Every person who loses their life due to violent crime is a tragedy. I'm not trying to undermine that in any way, shape, or form. So like, even if it was just one person per year, that's one too many, obviously. But it's not a horribly large number, right? And when you hear things like this and that has gone up, the question is, okay, what are the absolute numbers now? So just to illustrate what I mean, if you have, say, I don't know, 30 incidents per year, that would be an extremely low number, but just for illustration, 30 incidents per year or per month, whatever you want. And then, okay, so next year it increases to 60. So it's like, holy crap, 200%, right? It doubled, crazy. But if it's like 60 out of how many millions? How much is that really, right? So that's one thing to keep in mind. The other thing is that everything increased here. Let me see, where was that part? I mean, yeah, it's still relatively rare. Yes, that's right, here. So injuries caused by knife or sharp object rose 25%, blunt object 27%, another weapon 37%. So it says that the increase of violent crime with a firearm increased by 76, which is more than the others. But now we have firearms, and then we have a bunch of other categories, right? So if you add up the blunt object, another weapon, whatever, knife, if you add all those up and file them under non-firearm versus firearm, now suddenly it looks a little bit different, doesn't it? It sounds different. So how you present and interpret the numbers is different. You see what I'm getting here, right? Let's see, there were a few other things here. Right, there was something about lethality. Where was it? They also mentioned that the rate of firearm use in crime is up, but homicide's not that much. Yeah, it's still increased, but not as much as you may think. And there's also a difference between who, like whether it's in public or domestic or whatever. So there are a lot of things that go into this. I don't want to bore you with going through the entire thing. You can look at it for yourself. But where you always have to be careful with these statistics is sometimes they lump different things together. For example, if, how do I put this in a YouTube-friendly way? If someone decides to hit the exit switch, right, and uses a firearm to accomplish that, that is often classified as homicide or like under firearm violence, even though it's self-inflicted, right? Which is, of course, again, still tragic. It shouldn't happen. But I feel like there's a difference between that and also between home defense with a firearm, where the intruder might end up on the floor, right? There's a difference between that and a criminal using it on an innocent person. Can we agree on that? That still makes a substantial difference. So if you lump that all together in the statistics, they become skewed. Okay, let me catch up with the super chats here real quick. Thank you, Biggie Cheese. And Kirozu Desoya, if I pronounce that correctly. Probably not. As a Ruger fanboy, I'm sorry this is happening to you. Be safe, man. Yeah, thank you. And thanks, Yachira. In fact, big thank you. Very generous super chat. I appreciate that. One of the problems I have with gun control is what you brought up with entertainment companies. Corporations and the wealthy will always have exemptions or the resources to acquire protection. The common folk are left with a phone call. Did I bring that up? I don't remember that. Anyway, it's a valid point. So there, for example, like if you were to allow, like illegalize carry for the purpose of self-defense, right? You would see most likely an increase in firearm-related expirations. I probably shouldn't say the H word too much either. Thanks, YouTube. So you would see that, but then the question is, how many of those of an assailant ending up on the floor would replace the victim ending up on the floor, if you catch my meaning? Again, it's hard to say. I can't make a conclusive argument here or prove anything. It's just something to think about, right? There's a lot of things that go into this. And one of the things that bothers me is whenever people simplify it so much, where, for example, they point to Japan. They say, oh, Japan has a super low violent crime rate and crime rate in general, and ban firearms, right? Okay, but what's the cost? Because I have a pretty strong suspicion if you suddenly legalized guns in Japan, their homicide rate wouldn't shoot through the roof. Again, I cannot prove that, but I have a pretty strong suspicion that it would not cause a dramatic surge. What do you people think? I'm monologuing too much. Part of the reason why I'm doing this as a stream is because I wanted to get some discussion going, some back and forth, so I see what you people think of now. Now I've just been babbling, just monologuing myself. I need to stop every now and then and actually see what you think, because it's kind of the point here. Head wounds went up from when we added helmets because head wounds were replacing head deaths. Yeah, good point. There's also the what was it? There was a term for that effect again. I forgot. Survivorship bias. That's the one, where you have like a picture of World War planes with all the hits, and then they decided to reinforce those areas. But those areas are the non-essential ones. They could take all those hits and still make it down safely. So that's actually not the problem, right? Would need a lot more than two countries to compare. Too many differences between them. Oh, for sure. You would have to analyze that in great depth. Most of not all gun laws are more heavily enforced against minority groups and low-income folks. There's that too. There was something in the Statistics Canada article as well about how minorities are disproportionately more affected and more victims of those crimes. Yes. Here. Some population groups are more likely to be exposed to firearm-related violence. For example, Indigenous individuals, First Nations people, Inuit, Métis, represented 17% of firearm-related homicide victims in 2022. Much higher involving rifle or shotgun, 40%. So, and this here shows that basically, if your ass is as pasty white as mine, you're pretty safe on average. That's something that people are sometimes very worried about, which is clearly not that much of a factor, if at all. Okay. What else we got here? Wow, thank you. Is it U Fisher or EW Fisher? Anyway, appreciate it. Very generous. In college, I did research for a presentation. Almost every major atrocity of the 20th century was preceded by gun control. Yeah, I mean, I get your point, but we should be a little bit careful with that. Like, it doesn't mean that every time there's regulation, it's going to lead to that. Just to point that out. Again, it's a valid concern, but you should also still be careful about not overcorrecting, but kind of running away in the other direction. Thank you, Johannes. The main predictor for violent crime rate is wealth inequality, not weapon ownership. That's the interesting thing. Yeah, Finland is a good example. High gun ownership, low crime. There are a number of places like that. In fact, I wanted to look at that as well. Hang on. Yeah, so if you're looking at a list of the age rates, yes, do donate to Wikipedia. We do it annually, just as a side note. Canada in 2022 was a 0.889. You know where the US is at? Crap, I thought I had... Oh, wait. I was looking for another... I'm a dumbass. I was looking for another tab, but it's in the same list, obviously. They're somewhere between 2.5 and 4. There's nothing for 2022 here, but... So, Sweden, 0.597. Okay, this is not an astronomical number. I don't see what the big deal is. In fact, what I find interesting here is, and this is per 100,000, by the way, so it's adjusted for population size. What I find very interesting here is the Czech Republic, which has remarkably relaxed firearm laws. Last time I checked, don't quote me on that because I don't know if that's still the case, but last time I checked, it was actually legal to carry firearms for self-defense. So they should be they should have an astronomical number of incidents, undesirable incidents. 0.095. 0.095. It's nothing, essentially, right? I mean, people have made that point before where, various places, some have super strict gun laws, others have fairly lax ones. You have very different amounts of firearm-related droppings. That sounds very weird. People hitting the floor. So... Again, you cannot just run with that number and be like, oh, here, see? Because there's so many damn factors. Like everybody who has ever done research or looked into research knows that there's like a myriad of different factors. So it's not as simple as, oh, look at that country, look at that country. Like, yeah, you see there's different examples that go in different directions. There's a little bit more to it, right? Anyway, so let me just... I didn't come here for politics. I know. I generally keep my channel free of politics. This is the one exception that I will talk about, which is weapon laws. And notice, I'm keeping the partisan stuff out of it. I'm just talking about, the thing itself. I'm not talking about, oh, liberals this, conservatives that, blah, blah, blah. Screw that. Doesn't matter. Let's stick to the actual facts and our interpretations of them, whatever, numbers, right? It's it's different. Okay. So, I have to wonder here. What is this supposed to do? What is prohibiting all these models? What is that supposed to do? We already have strict gun regulations. We already have, you need to acquire a license. There's requirements for it. There are requirements for storage, etc. There's the magazine capacity restriction for semi-auto firearms, which is very strict, right? Okay, so what's the deal here? There is a list of, can I say mass shootings, YouTube? Is that okay at least? Can I say that? In Canada. All right. And again, obviously, each one of these is one too many. I will absolutely agree. This should not be happening. Not a single one of these. Every one of these numbers is tragic. Should not happen. We're on the same page there. But is it really rampant? This is a large country, right? This is a pretty large population size overall, widespread. And, okay, this is since 1902, right? Everything here listed. If you look at the US, just 2024 almost beats it. Like about the past 2 years are as much as Canada since 1902. But is this really such a major rampant problem? And when it does happen, like the 2020 Nova Scotia shooting in Portapique, what was used? Illegally obtained Ruger Mini 14 and other 4 firearms, pistols stolen from an RCMP officer, and 3 illegally obtained from the US. And that's in here too, in the StatCan article. Yeah. Most of the firearms that are actually used in these crimes are illegal to begin with. So they look at 49 cases here where it was known. In 8 cases of those, it was stolen from a legal owner, which that's a storage problem. That's not you're not allowed to own it. That's you have to store it safely and responsibly, which is already law, right? Other 5 cases purchased illegally from the legal owner. That's a problem. Yeah, that should not happen. Most cases, firearm was illegal. Had never even been legally owned in Canada. Of the 36 illegal ones, 20 were traced, 6 of them American origin, 14 not known. So, what is this going to do? If the firearms used in these tragic events are illegal to begin with, what are more prohibitions going to do? How would they address that? That's what I want to know. Okay. What does have to be rampant to be addressed? Because we're talking about restricting the freedoms of law-abiding citizens. I think there should be a very high requirement to prove the necessity, that there's a major necessity in a way to safeguard the greater good on a very significant, large scale that justifies taking freedoms away from people. The default should always be toward personal freedom. Can we agree on that? Not everybody would, probably, but so there's a pretty high standard required in my book. You can't just be like, this this happened, so screw you. We're just going to ban this now. You know, like someone got injured with a tool, ban that tool. You know, oh, we have too many car accidents, ban cars. Yeah, I know. Okay, I've heard this before. You know, cars are necessary in everyday life, guns are not. Depends on who you ask. There are some people who are reliant on them in everyday life for hunting, you know, for sustenance. So, but either way, if the absolutely vast majority, like 99.9 whatever percent of gun owners are perfectly law-abiding, don't do any harm whatsoever, there needs to be a much stronger case for restricting their rights. I mean, okay, in Canada it's not a right, but that's how I stand on that. Let's see. Thanks, Thumb Ugly. Gun control is about control, criminals don't obey. In all fairness, it's also about trying to limit the sheer numbers to make it harder for them to get them, because as I said, they can be stolen from legal gun owners, etc. That's true. How effective that is a different story. I'm just trying to be fair here and look at the arguments from both sides. Or any side. I'm trying to do this as a binary here. Specific weapon bans are pure symbolism. In my opinion, absolutely. It's because really the way it often comes across is a politician simply going, oh, I'm doing something. Look at me, I'm doing something. Completely symbolic, ineffectual action, but hey, I'm doing something, give me your vote now. Again, trying to be fair, taking a step back from my personal view and bias, it was also mentioned here that, where was this? There wasn't, yeah, that's right. A different article here. CBC, so how reliable that is a different story, but supposedly this Ipsos poll here showed that 82% of people surveyed supported Bill C-21, which was the previous round of bans. So the majority of the population, or at least the ones polled, are in favor of it, and that is something that you have to take into account as well, right? Because gun owners are a minority. So if the majority of the population is okay with that, then I may disagree with it, but at the same time, I also have to say, well, okay, at least it's backed up by a popular, well, not vote, by popular opinion, right? There are too many things that are just forced through without any regard for what the population thinks. I mean, I'm pretty sure this is the case too, because obviously this was not a vote on it, this was just a poll. So it just so happens that people agree with it. Anyway, okay. Now I'm getting a little bit too far into politics. I do want to stay away from those finer points, but just I don't see the justification here. The justification? Anyway. Thanks, Mr. One. Really seems like the Canadian government does want its citizens to defend itself. It's a bit scary. You mean does not want? I mean, yeah, pretty much. It's weird though, because there have been cases where people have defended their home and or their life, I mean, really their life generally, with a firearm who were found innocent, right? It happens. Like, you are allowed to defend yourself here. Oh, there's another thing I find very ironic. There's been either a proposal, or they're already doing it, of sending these newly prohibited firearms, when they're being turned in, sending them to Ukraine so people can defend themselves. So, officially, people defending their lives with firearms is okay, just not here. Is that what we're saying here? Is it a different situation? Yes. Yes, it is. It's a different context. But still, it does boggle the mind. Thanks, Lux Lunai. Over-control of guns leads to border cities like Windsor, Ontario having really high rates of smuggled and illegal/unregistered firearms. Yeah. That's the other thing, by the way. Every time you ban more, what happens? A lot of people suddenly mysteriously lose theirs. I'm not condoning that. I'm just pointing out that this is something that very commonly happens. So oftentimes when you prohibit firearms, they become more likely to end up in the wrong hands, in not so law-abiding hands. I mean, in all fairness, by doing that, you become not law-abiding. You know, if you don't turn them in, but make them go somewhere else, there's that. But either way, thanks, Lant. Mine goes click. We must hold the line after the gun guys. The gun guys, us blade. Oh, okay. After the gun guys, us blade bros are next. Good to have your stream after work. I mean, yeah, there's also various blades that are being that were prohibited and have been for a long time. Let's see. What do you people think? Keep it civil, by the way. Try. Next step, prohibit fists. Yeah. Every time you prohibit anything, it becomes more attractive. In some ways, in some circles at least. When a citizen owns a gun that will get prohibited, what happens? There's a certain grace period in which people can hand them in. But then after that, well, what did we ban now? Can you sum it up for latecomers? There's another round of prohibitions of particular models in Canada that happened just recently, which is quite a long list. It's a lot of semi-automatic firearms that have been legal for, well, decades, obviously. Well, depending on how old they are, for as long as the model has been around. And some of the choices are rather strange in my book. And so I've been trying to make a case here that there should be a very high requirement to prove the necessity. Like it should be very clear cut that, okay, by enacting these prohibitions, we will be saving a lot of lives. But looking at the data, it doesn't seem like that's the case, because the majority of violent crime that we see that we have numbers for involves firearms that are illegal to begin with, either acquired from the US or elsewhere, or stolen, or what have you. That's a short version. Thanks, Craig. Let's get you guys in Mexico on board and make it the United Continent of America. No, thank you. I have no idea why there's spacing in strange places and I can't fix it. Not a big deal. Semi-auto does not equate to any kind of rapid fire. The thing is also, as said, the magazine capacity limit is 5. Do you know how quickly 5 rounds go in a semi? If you just go bang, 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 bang. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, I'm done. Reloading. In fact, I would argue that a pump action shotgun could do more damage more quickly than a semi-auto, because there are magazine fed ones. Oh no, actually, don't let me give them ideas. Even tube fed that have like 10 or whatever. I feel like ultimately it's going to be faster to just keep topping it up than to just go with 5. Right? Should Canada gun laws be like in the US? In my opinion, no. There should be some restrictions. I do think that's reasonable. Things like mandatory safety course. But this is going too far. Like, the people who have acquired a license, those are people who've already jumped the hurdles. They've already gone through all that. You know, background check and safety course and whatever. Like, in fact, you can get a prohibited license. Like, yes, there's certain requirements, like you have to be a business or some. There's a few other categories of people who can do that, but for most people, it's not accessible. But it's possible. So why not? Why not let certain licenses have have permission to own certain things? That's how it's been the entire time. Thanks, Ecthelion. People in my country can't own anything aside HG and SG. While it restricts the access to guns for criminals, they often modify them, turning HG into SMG. Thanks again, Johannes. IMO guns should be treated like cars legally. I mean, that's pretty much how it is. Because you need a driver's license, you need a firearms license. Right? By the way, I keep looking at the camera or the preview here, kind of annoyed. The way it looks in OBS is not the way it looks on the camera's screen. I don't know why it's so weirdly red and washed out looking. It should look better than that, but it doesn't. Anyway. US does require training and safety courses for concealed carry licenses. Yeah, makes sense. You might be an HDR on your camera. Maybe. Imagine if the government told you that you couldn't buy any car with a gas tank above 5 gallons and had a list of cars that were illegal to own. Yeah. Okay, let me check. Are there prohibited cars in Canada? Now I want to know. I don't think so. I was just starting to wonder, you know? Armored one. Okay, yeah, armored vehicles for civilian use, yeah, I guess. Now, like I said earlier, the part of the idea of making this a stream is so we can have some back and forth. But of course, at the same time, it is a little bit filtered. This is a weapons-related channel after all, so I'm guessing most, or at least a sizable chunk of my audience is not going to argue, but there are people. I mean, there are people who like historical arms and armor and swords and whatnot, but are vehemently anti-gun. That is a thing. So I do want to be open to counter arguments. So feel free. Again, keep it civil. Thanks, Vaughn. Morning. Still better than Australian gun laws. Yeah, I mean, okay. Also, the handgun freeze is also silly. They did that a while ago, where the owners of handguns, they can still keep them. They're still legal. Nothing is banned, but you cannot transfer them anymore. You can't sell them anymore. Which is also a big slap in the face of law-abiding firearm owners. Also, what's that doing exactly? Thanks, Erantheal. Hope I got that right. This seems like a no-win situation for Canada where things can't be ignored, but the issue comes from the US, which Canada can't do anything about. Yeah, I mean, the more draconic you'll be, or generally, like, draconic gun regulations don't do anything if the criminals get illegal firearms from elsewhere. That's kind of the whole point. So the cost-benefit analysis here is off, is what I'm saying. Because you're punishing a whole lot of people for things they're not doing. That's what I don't get. I mean, again, I get it. It's to get votes. You just show the private seller your license and they sell you the gun. Well, the problem is you have to transfer it because restricted handguns are also registered. Other firearms are not, like non-restricted firearms are not registered. Which is, by the way, most of that list of newly prohibited ones. So they don't even know who has them. Punishing the many for the actions of the few, yeah. I mean, isn't that how it always goes? A few black sheep ruin it for everybody. You know, like a few people do something stupid or unethical or whatever, and then, you know, something that used to be perfectly legal, now you can't do anymore. Thanks, Bounce Your Cross. As a non-Canadian, is this because the Conservatives might actually win and take control of the country? I feel like it's, well, yeah, no, it is somewhat related. I feel like it's a way to, again, virtue signal and be like, hey, vote for us. We're doing something to keep you safe and those other guys won't. This kind of thing. Maybe. Probably didn't see it when I commented, but thank you for being inspiration on my weight loss journey. Well, I guess lately I'm not much of an inspiration. Sorry. Thanks, person with a bunch of numbers as a name. Are CO2 guns restricted? And are they decent for self-defense? There is a restriction on the maximum velocity. I think what was like 495 FPS, I think it was. Above that, you can still have them, but then they require a license. Are they decent for self-defense? No. CO2 gun. Well, okay, there are a few. There are some big bore, high-powered ones, but I think those are pneumatic, not CO2, right? Or I think there are a couple that are designed to shoot like rubber balls and such that are CO2 powered. By the way, let me also point out that pepper spray is prohibited. Pepper spray. Specifically a non-lethal self-defense option. A safe option that's not going to do permanent harm. But it's quite effective at stopping attacks. Why? Damned if I know. Thanks, Rykop. Thank you for the summary. Sadly, I doubt that these decisions are based on whether or not banning ever more legal guns is... Oh yeah, ever more legal guns is actually reducing crime being committed with illegal guns. Optics over data. That's exactly the problem here. At least that's how I see it. Again, I have my own biases. That's how I see it. You can buy that at any Canadian Tire. Bear spray. Yes. Bear spray specifically you can get. But like mace and like various forms of spray that's marketed for self-defense, that's the other silly thing, right? Pretty much the same thing, but one is marketed for use against people, the other for use against bears, and I think dogs too. I think dog spray you can get too. So like, it's all a bunch of silly nonsense. And you're not allowed to carry that for defense against people. But from what I understand, if you carry dog spray and you say, I'm carrying this for defense against dogs, and then you happen to be attacked by something on two legs and you use it, that's reasonable and legal, I think. Don't quote me on that. I'm not a lawyer. That's how I understand it as a lay person. Wasp spray is objectively worse than mace. That would suck, yeah. Getting that in the face, that would not be fun, that's true. Yeah. Have you ever considered moving to the US? No, not really. I mean, I've thought about it here and there, but as overburdened as the healthcare system in Canada is, it still works better. And there's other reasons too, but yeah. The thing is, I'm not a single issue voter by any means. I'm not one of those people who are like, oh, okay, my guns or whatever. That's the only reason. No, there's a bunch of things. Like a lot of things matter in life. Not just that, but not that I'm happy with any of the options. You'll be surprised how nasty pepper spray can be. Oh no, I know. It's just, it usually doesn't do permanent damage. I mean, it's just a very rare case that it does. It's hell while you're affected by it, but you're going to recover from it. Thanks, Conscript. History tends to indicate that disarmament is not done for the most positive means. Also, I hope you're all well. Yeah, the examples, there's definitely some cautionary examples. Oh, another weird thing, I'm pretty sure I've mentioned that before, but another strange thing about the laws here is if you get an antique firearm made before 1897, I think it was, original, you know, whatever it is, whether it's a revolver or a muzzleloader or whatever, anything made before that date or that year, perfectly legal. You don't even need a license. It's a non-firearm, right? If you buy a reproduction of the exact same model, restricted, which means you can't even buy it anymore now. Make that make sense. Don't you dare. Don't you dare. I know. Just saying that makes some lawmakers think, oh yeah, actually, maybe we should prohibit antique. No. Don't you. No. No. Shush. Don't even think about it. I'm pretty sure there's literally no black powder firearm related crime. Antiques barely work anyways. No, there's some firearms in very good condition. I mean, I've shown some on my channel. If you've seen the Webley that I showed, that wasn't perfectly. I mean, it was not perfect condition by any means, but perfectly usable. It works. You know, it ain't pretty. Well, it is, but like in terms of condition, like surface condition, but still works. So reproduction, restricted, original, anyone can own. Does that make sense? Gangbangers shooting illegal handguns in Toronto is a lot different than sport shooters and hunters. Yeah, exactly. My point exactly. Many early revolvers aren't great, but serviceable? Yes. They have very heavy triggers and they tend to shoot super high. But, still works. Did you sell the Webley? Yeah. Things are expensive, unfortunately, originals. So I couldn't afford to keep that. Bills to pay. And I had more of a budget then. Gangbangers with flintlocks, yeah. Yup. Home defense with a blunderbuss. Like the founding fathers intended. No. Brown Bess, of course, but blunderbuss is funnier. All governments are flawed. That's true. Thanks, Jules. Where's Dante? Don't even. Someone who had an original naval flintlock pistol and it still works. Yeah, I mean, I had the 18, what the hell was it? I forgot, but I had an Aston percussion pistol that also still worked, even though it was the condition was a bit crusty. Thanks, Thumb Ugly. Restrictions up to sunset, gun ownership, no transfers at some point. Restrictions on reproductions, same, squeeze out all guns by the next generation. Yeah. That may very well be the long-term plan. Thanks. I'm just going to call you 69, because those are the first two, and that's a good number. If you modify an original cap and ball revolver to accept more modern cowboy load ammo, is it now a regulated firearm? No. As far as I know, The important part is the frame. In fact, I used to own one that where the barrel was modified or replaced or something, which is perfectly legal, because like the firearm itself is like in terms of the law is the frame. So you can replace the barrel or whatever, do something with it, and it's still fine. Yeah, the receiver. So, I mean, again, don't quote me on that, but I think it should be legal to upgrade a percussion revolver to cartridges. I could be wrong about that. But it should, from what I understand, should be legal. I don't know for sure. I'm American. I can empathize with you guys. Oh, you got all the guns you can. Well, okay. It's also gotten stricter there, right? But, yeah, generally you can own a lot more than we can. Except, we're better off with not having these SBR laws. Like, we can have mare's legs and whatnot, no problem. We don't need to, like, pay extra and apply for it or whatever. Get a government stamp. SBR stuff is very weird. That's actually also kind of an interesting thing. In the US, there's generally more, they go more after rifles, right? You know, assault rifles and all that. Whereas Canada, at least traditionally, has been stricter on the handguns rather than the long arms. Kind of funny how that goes in two very different directions. It's a holdover from an old attempted ban on pistols. Yeah. Texans or SBR laws were made to try and ban pistols in the 30s. Okay. Banning pistols in Texas. Wow. What a futile attempt. What's next? Banning horses? Next thing you know, they're going to try banning sheep buggering in Alabama. Yeah, that's true. Depends on the state. Some places can have most things. Other states are very restrictive. Yeah, it's easy. Like, people often lump the entire U.S. together, which is silly, because the states have very different laws in a lot of cases. You know, like Texas and Cali and New York and Tennessee or whatever, they have, you know, depends. Like, it varies what's legal where. Horses have it rough already. Leave them alone. Do they? I feel like horses are generally treated pretty well these days. Unlike most of history. So President, target large capacity manual action magazines yet. Don't give them ideas. Please don't. They might just be like, oh, hang on. This lever action can fit 14 rounds? We can't have that. No, shut up. Recently I saw a 12 gauge drum magazine with a 30 round or 30 shell capacity, which was absurd. The thing is huge. And doesn't cycle very well. Surprise. Texas can carry swords. Does anyone? I feel like normally you don't want to bring a sword to a gunfight, but yeehaw, I guess. Saw one dude carrying an axe. I mean, axes are pretty handy tools. Are you familiar with in-range TV? Yes, I am. Haven't seen any Texans with a claymore on the internet. Gotta keep looking. In Poland, you can carry swords, no problem. I mean, you can carry swords in Canada, too. There's no law against that. You know, an officer might question you why you're carrying that around, but it's legal. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of this. They say that hunting is legitimate and they don't want to go after hunters, but some of those laws do disadvantage hunters as well. Germany doesn't even allow cosplay weapons? Is that true? That can't be right. Can it? That sounds crazy. If you carry a sword with intent of hurting someone, it's illegal. The thing is, if you carry anything with the intent of hurting someone, it's illegal. It's the intent that matters. So, like, if I grab this steel straw and, you know, I strap it to my belt and I go out there and I'm, you know, if someone asks me, like, hey, why are you carrying a... I mean, why would they? But if I were asked why am I carrying something, like, it's to defend myself, then I'd be in trouble. Bizarre, but that's how it is. Tactical straw, yeah. Thanks, Armando. If you want to know what happens when people refuse to follow ridiculous restrictions, look into the Illinois assault weapon ban. Less than 1% compliance. Yeah, I mentioned that earlier. The fact that quite often when you're banning something, stuff may just end up lost. Again, I don't condone that, but it's just the reality of it. The last straw, yes. Exactly. Steel straws make pretty good mini blowguns. Yeah, kind of. Which, by the way, guess what? Are prohibited in Canada. Yeah. Blowguns. AKA a fucking tube. It does boggle the mind. What, tubes? No. Mm-mm. Bigger straws. Larger diameter, longer straws. No, you can't have those. What? That, I think that is still the most absurd law. I mean, prohibitions, weapon prohibition specifically in Canada. I don't think anything else can beat the absurdity of that. Like, come on. Thanks, Landmine Goes Click. Button-activated collapsible batons are banned, but centrifugal force batons are legal. Doesn't make sense. Also, cocaine spray for the memes. Cocaine spray? Cocaine bear spray? Yeah. Yeah. Like, same thing. It's just, oh no, there's a button. I mean, that applies to stiletto knives as well. You know, the ones, the old-fashioned ones that open, or automatic knives in general, that open at the push of a button. So you can grab your damn knife and you can open it by hand, right? One way or another. You just open the damn thing, or you push a button and it comes out. Difference in speed? 0.15 seconds? No, that's already too much. We're talking like some milliseconds. We're talking versus... It makes no damn difference. I just want there to be actual, rational, sane reasons behind bans. Well-informed, researched, well-argued. Not just like, oh, it's scary. Thanks, Eranthial. Am I pronouncing that right? Let me know. I can't say personally that having more guns than people in the US as standard of living decreases, makes me feel safer as things keep getting worse. I totally get that. The US do have a violence problem and I think it's fair to say, a gun problem too. Some of you may want to crucify me for that, but like, can you really deny it? Like, just looking at the numbers. It's sad, like, if I look at the entire list of mass shootings in Canada since 1902, it adds up. It looks like it about adds up to 2 years in the US, more or less. In all fairness, size difference, population size in the US is many times larger than Canada. That is something to keep in mind as well. Sometimes things are a little bit skewed because people will give you numbers like someone somewhere in the US is getting shot every 15 minutes or whatever. Like, again, huge population size and vast area. Like, the United States are large, pretty damn large. There are a lot of people, right? So you do have to take that into account when talking about these things. And also, if there's a lot of gang violence, if like the majority or at least a substantial chunk of the firearm-related violence happens between gang members, then guess what? You're okay if you're not in a gang. So it doesn't actually affect you directly as such. It's still undesirable. It still should be fixed, ideally, by whatever means. But still makes a difference, you know? Thanks, Boxcar Hobo. In the US, most of the gun violence is in the cities with the most restrictive laws. In the US, they wanted to ban points on chef knives. In UK, yeah, that is UK, not US. Yeah. That's also very silly. I've talked about that before. Thanks, Infernal Saxon. It's always been an urban versus rural issue. Yeah, that's definitely a thing as well. Like, how much does that happen in the countryside? Not that much, right? A lot of people have guns there, but they typically don't use them against one another as much. Thanks, Boom Chaka. You will never get good reasons. They only want to control people and freedom of speech. Without right to arms, you don't have freedom of speech. I can't quite agree with that. Like, I see your point. I see where you're coming from. It's just a very cynical view of the government, which, again, I can understand. But you can have freedom of speech. I mean, plenty of countries have freedom of speech, at least within a certain extent, that don't have right to arms. Now, even the US doesn't have completely unrestricted. Like slander, for example, slander, libel is not allowed. That doesn't fall under free speech. You know, yelling fire in a crowded theater. There's a bunch of examples. Like, there are always going to be some limitations on it, right? Thanks, Dustin. Most gun crime in the U.S. is gang/drug related. Yeah, that's what I was just talking about. It would appear so. That's a myth. Is it really? The numbers I've seen do seem to support that. Well, at least in Canada. Although there was more, actually it was more about the legality of the firearms being used. No, actually, no, there was also something about, hang on. There was something about other criminal acts. They found, oh yeah, here, hang on. People accused of firearm-related homicide are more likely to have a criminal history than persons accused of homicide committed by another method. Criminal history, history of violence, history pertaining to property crime, history pertaining to other criminal code or federal statute offenses such as drug or firearm-related offenses. So this does support the idea that firearm-related dropping of bodies on the floor is heavily skewed toward the more criminal underbelly, so to speak. Thanks, Gabs Labs. Here in Brazil, 55k homicides per year, and most people don't have guns. Like 20% have guns. Most guns are from criminals. Here it's very hard to have legal guns, and the government wants to take the rest. Yeah. What's that going to do, really? Do we need a study to tell you that? Yes. Let me just go on a quick tangent about that. It happens all too often that people think just because something sounds like common sense means that you don't need to prove it or you don't need data for it. No, you always need data, okay? Always. Research is never a bad idea because even if it seems like common sense, especially in hindsight when you already know the numbers, right? That doesn't mean necessarily that it has to be like that. There have been plenty of cases where they found in studies that, oh, you know what? This thing that you were convinced is 100% commonsensical, that's actually not true, according to the actual research. And I don't want people to just be like, oh yeah, my argument is everybody knows. No, that's not an argument. You still need to prove it, okay? Just as a pet peeve of mine. You always need spreadsheets, yeah. Spread them sheets. Anyway, I've pretty much covered what I wanted to talk about. Don't want to drag this stream on too long. Again, I'm open to counter arguments and everything. I don't just want to be like, hey, I like guns, so I want them to be illegal. There's definitely arguments one way or another. I just think that these recent prohibitions in particular are very pointless and are not actually addressing the issue. And I highly doubt they're going to change anything, any statistics. Unless other independent factors just so happen to cause those numbers to go down. That's what I'm thinking. Thanks, Steve O'Devil. Hail Skallagrim chat. Hope you all have a good day. Hope you do as well. OTF are not dangerous in the least. Yeah, absolutely. There's nothing more dangerous about an OTF knife than a blade that folds out sideways or a fixed blade, or it's all silly. Anyway, that's it. That's about, not everything, but that's a lot of what I have to say on the topic. And thank you for having a chat with me about that. Sharing your opinions. Seems like the majority of you agree with me, which is kind of unfortunate. It's better to have like an actual discussion back and forth. I mean, I probably just didn't see some of the objections because it's a busy chat, so it's easy to overlook. But it's just like, from what I'm seeing here overall, it seems like most people do not agree with these kinds of bans. So, yeah. Anyway, thanks for showing up. Hope you found it interesting. Stay safe, folks. Take care.